So here we are back in the kitchen, and for our third brewing method, we're going to utilize something that most people have in their kitchen already, and that is the stove. So this is the MOKA pot. Some people might call it some sort of percolator, Italian espresso pot, bialetti, but it is the MOKA pot with a K. And what it allows us to get is essentially an espresso, but without having an espresso machine. So it's a little bit more diluted, and I'm gonna walk you through some tips that I learned early on to try to get the best coffee out of this thing. Some people never use it. It was one of the first brewers that I used because I liked having strong coffee. But what's interesting about this one is if you implement a few of these few little tips, you can actually get a pretty good coffee out of this. And I'll talk you through some of the misconceptions I think that come along while using one of these máquinas. Now, some of the things that I've heard about this thing is that you should never wash it. And I've had some people ask me this, like, why is it tasting so like burnt or bitter or kind of astringent? I heard that you're not supposed to wash it. And I just thought that was so funny, but it kind of makes sense when you think about a cast iron pan also used on the stovetop. You're cooking a lot of things, you're putting oil in. Yes, you do want to wash it from time to time, but I get the idea. You want to keep it seasoned. Coffee's not one of those things. When coffee sticks on something for too long, it can start to get rancid. And that is one good reason why you just want to wash this thing, keep it as clean as possible, keep it as dry as possible. Don't leave the coffee in there overnight. And we'll get to that in a second. But one of my favorite strategies for utilizing this MOKA pot is actually starting with hot water. So here we got the kettle. We're actually not even gonna use this temperature thing because we're gonna pour hot water into here, and then we're gonna use the flame just to get that steam going and make our coffee. So let's just fill it up to the valve here. I like to do it right in the middle of the valve. And then this is why we have this cloth. And then I just put this on top and I pour the coffee inside. And then use this cloth so you don't burn yourself on the aluminum. Screw this thing on. As you can see, this is a very fancy MOKA pot, it doesn't have a handle. So we'll just use this cloth for that too. Put it on here, get the flame going. Not too hot though. That's another thing too, is like you want the water to basically turn into steam, but you don't want it to do it too fast, and also you don't want it to bake the beans. Maybe I'm not using the right term, but essentially what happens is if you heat up those beans too much after they've already been roasted, they've already been ground, while the water's heating up, it might impart a little bit more bitterness as well. And that's another reason why sometimes we even leave this lid open so that it can let some of the cool air in there, so that by the time that it starts spewing over, it's not over extracting. So as you can see here, it's actually spilling over. The steam is being boiled at the bottom, traveling up through the coffee and finding its way into the top chamber of this thing. So what we're gonna do is turn that flame off, give that a close, grab our cloth so we don't get burnt. And what you will have here is a fairly concentrated cup of coffee here. So not quite an espresso, but also not quite a filter. Yeah, it has a very typical MOKA pot, sort of like stovetop taste to it, but that can be very nostalgic and I quite like it. So try for yourself. Don't let the coffee get too hot. Try grinding a little bit finer so you give a little bit of compression and pressure as it travels up, and use fresh coffee. Let's go to the next brew method.